An interview with Artist-Filmmaker Sop and a special screening of their new film. Meet artist and RestFest alum Sop and learn about their newest film We Year, premiering virtually this month in collaboration with RestFest. I'm very excited to be bringing you this interview with the excellent artist and RestFest alum Sop. I had the pleasure of meeting Sop as a participating filmmaker in the inaugural RestFest Film Festival in 2024, screening their earlier film Numa Revisited. I'm honored to continue this collaboration with a special screening of their newest film We Year in June. Beck Miriam, artist and RestFest founder. We Year is a mixed media moving image love letter to others with energy-limiting conditions. Using 16mm direct animation, archival and new footage, poetic voiceover, and an ethereal soundscape, artist Sop immerses us into the both isolating and unifying experience of a chronic illness flare during a hot summer indoors. An interview with Sop. I'm always so touched by your work. In both content and form, there is a poignant cripping of time. Looking at form with We Year and your earlier film Numa Revisited, programmed in our 2024 festival, you bridge the past and present by using footage and text you'd created in the past with that which was created more recently to craft work with both temporal cohesion and tension. It's something I do in my own practice, creating an archive of footage and writings to use in a future unknown project. It feels a uniquely Crip way of creating. To start, I'd love hearing more about how this film came about.
Thanks, Beck. That's really nice to hear. The origin of the film started as an essay written under great frustration the summer before, called I Am Writing, I Am We. I was being seen by an insomnia clinic and I'd been cycling through lots of different pills which didn't work on me. Finally, they gave me one which is supposed to be this magic pill, which in the essay I write about as the diamond pill. I had planned to go to my friend's big birthday meal, and I'd rested carefully all week to be able to go. I was in a very long ME/CFS relapse, so events outside the home had to be planned very carefully. But I thought it would be a really great idea to start taking this brand new medication the night before. I couldn't sleep all night as my body was freaking out processing these new meds. My heart rate on my Garmin watch, which I was using as an energy tracker and which features heavily in the film, was just absolutely epic. The screen was just full of these huge orange stress bars, and needless to say, in the morning, I was way too ill to go to the birthday meal. I was really pissed off, but I was also in that kind of amazing space you can sometimes get when you're utterly sleep deprived, but the drug is still in your system. You are a kind of daytime sedated, and this somehow creatively opens you up. You're a bit looser. The mind is sort of creatively abstracted. So I ended up writing a rant about being stuck indoors with a gorgeous summer sun blazing outside, about not being able to do stuff, about this diamond pill, and being locked in, almost at mercy, to my energy tracker, which I watched throughout the day. I wanted it to be a solidarity rant, a kind of letter to other disabled people stuck indoors, too unwell to go outside. It was also an attempt to try and describe the very hard to describe experience of being ill with a reduced world over a span of several years. When I was approached by Shape Arts, a UK disability arts organisation, offering me a commission as part of the Adam Reynolds Award programme, I decided to adapt this essay into a script for We Year.
Tell me more about the process of adapting the essay into a moving image work.
When I was offered the commission, I was still far too sick to be able to go out and film new work, but I did have this essay. I hadn't been able to make much work for a couple of years due to the relapse, which had put me in the severe category, and the essay was one of the few things I had produced. It made sense to me to make a film about this period of relapse, and the decision to use an existing work was the first in a choice to use old materials from my archive in the film, what I had to hand or had made already. Reusing work was something that I had done before, an adoption of what is to hand to make work when you are too sick to create new work, taking the old to make the new. I first did this process of adapting an essay into a script for a film the last time Shape Arts commissioned me to make a work, which was subsequently screened in the first ever RestFest Festival. This work was called Pneuma Revisited. I took an old film of mine called Pneuma from 2000, made originally to be shown as a silent, looped installation, and I re-edited it with a script adapted from an essay which I'd been commissioned to write in 2021 about the film by Town at Eastbourne. I call this way of working remixing old works to make a new one under the condition of being energy limited whilst sick. With We Year, I wanted to stick a little to the format of an essay. It might be an unusual or a clunky choice to stick with the style of a different format of work when adapting it to another, but I wanted to speak to the viewer as the reader of the letter, the essay, and to invite them to be on the same journey as the writer. I wanted to keep the feeling that I had started a piece of work or writing, and that I, or it, would finish when my, or its, energy ran out. I kept the first and last lines the same for the film. The beginning, I start and will finish when my battery runs out, and the last lines of the film, the letters sign off, now written to the chronically ill viewer, which changes from the I to the we. I am writing, I am we are a year, we are rest, we rest. Only then do you realise, save from maybe the film's title, that I'm talking to us all of the chronically ill. My main task with the essay adaptation was to describe into a different medium the experience of being ill and living in a reduced world over several years. Practically, I had to reduce the essay quite a lot to make the script. The original essay elaborated a bit more, touching on how hard it is to continue to connect with people through long periods of time spent when sick. It briefly talks to an other, as someone who is maybe not sick, or perhaps a stand-in for a whole community. Sadly, I also had to cut a very fun and descriptive section where I order a delicious gluten-free waffle treat to my house.
We talked about how you combine different materials created at different times, and I'd like to dig into the nitty-gritty of creating a multimedia film. 16mm direct animation, live action footage, voiceover, and sound coming together to create a gorgeous visual and sonic world. Why did you choose to make this a multimedia work, and why these specific mediums?
It was a choice made out of restriction. As I was unable to film outside of the house, I turned to what I had at my reach, which was a lot of footage which I have filmed over the past few decades. I ended up using several different elements. The adapted script from the essay, which I voice in the film, old Hi-8 and mini DV video, clips which could be as much as 20 years old, new and recent footage taken on a mobile phone inside of my house, and direct animation where I crudely, visually translated in ink the energy bars on my Garmin watch onto 16mm film, which washes over the entirety of the film. The sound elements were the voiceover, which was steady and constant, and a soundtrack by Midex, including new music by two white cranes, which undulates to the narrative and to the overlaid and overlapped footage. I hope that merging this material in this often claustrophobic yet fluid way would help depict these odd internal worlds revolving in crypt time in which we exist. I see the film's arc as a crypt one, characterised visually through these overlaid mediums. From the hand-drawn wearables visual form of technology, a body's internal report present in all scenes, to the narrative, shifting between past and present, interior and exterior, from snatches of film from decades prior when I was well and able to move around the world freely, to a gradual lessening of mobility, being stuck indoors but able to film on a mobile, observing the interior world of my home and my body. It is important that the energy tracking 16mm film is overlaid over the whole film, as it is a constant representation of my body, and also acts as a barrier between myself and the viewer, the outside world.
We often talk about our shared experience as ADHD artists. Although Weir primarily focuses on the experience of living with an energy-limiting condition, do you feel that your neurodivergence is also relevant to the film and its creative process?
Absolutely. I think this is a very neurodivergently made film. The film is heavily layered and doesn't harbour much space. I see that partly as an inadvertent result of being neurodivergent, the desire to say everything and show everything all at once, and more purposefully, trying to show concurrent states of existence within the body: memory, reality, loss, technology, all stacked and compressed. It is veering on the claustrophobic, but maybe it's also an illustration of the way the neurodiverse are able to quickly link information in a non-normative way. I am aware that the film is quite an intense watch, with little space for reflection. I'm not very concerned with this intense nature. It feels honest to both my way of working and to my capacities, both physically and cognitively, and how I experience the world. Because of this, the film may need a couple of viewings, which I also don't mind. I would like it to be a kind of wild ride to watch, showing how confusing living in crypt time can be. Moving between time, a reduced space, an impaired memory, like a dream space to enter and float through, to absorb what you can, over capturing every nuance and thought in the film. I also have to say that it is a punk film made by a punk. When writing punk, or more experimental punk music, I have no respect for agreed normative structures or rules. This means I will tend to condense the work over giving it a lot of space, similar to the ethos of writing a short 3-minute punk song. I also don't have a lot of respect for a song's traditional structure. The more experimental punk music I have written may meander or stay with an idea for longer than you should, or shift entirely and unexpectedly to something else. Although not quite as experimental in structure as some of that music, this film is, however, my most punk-aligned work, and I would like to try and keep to those principles in the future, and I'm excited to see how this progresses in my work. It feels like the start of a journey.
Accessibility is so important in filmmaking. How do you make the filmmaking one which meets your access needs? And what are your considerations for making the final product accessible to fellow disabled viewers?
I am not very skilled with computers and they really deplete my energy, so I always work with others to edit. And although I do make my own music, I prefer to work with other people to make a film soundtrack, as I enjoy the interpretation of my films, albeit with a loose brief. Working with a team that I know well creates an access intimacy. The symptom which causes me most trouble is nervous system dysregulation. So working with people who I know very well and that I feel comfortable with is like hanging out with a friend, which can make working much easier, and subsequently I achieve more in a session. I work regularly with an editor, Kester Davis, who has the most unending patience. This is the third film I have worked with him on, and he really understands and meets my fluctuating energy. Physically, the making of the film had to bend to a very low capacity, as I was recovering from this relapse. To make the 16mm animation, I had to lie down flat for ages to recover from 5 minutes sitting at a desk drawing. I needed to edit remotely, lying on my sofa taking breaks. I could only manage around half a day a week at most, so it took around a year to edit the film in this way. To record the vocal track, I built a tent-like structure in my studio at home, made out of duvets suspended from the ceiling, with a kind of small reclining bed inside, so I was able to record my vocals comfortably. The soundtrack with Midex was also made remotely. I handed over free rein to begin with, as I wanted to see how someone who didn't have chronic illness would interpret this story. But the first attempt turned out to be much darker than I envisaged, more like a horror film soundtrack. So we re-edited the score, again remotely, with me giving feedback in a piecemeal way, working very closely and giving quite abstract mini briefs as a tone for each scene. Shape Arts helped me with the captioning and the audio description for the film. We worked together to try and match the tone of the narrative and the painterly, dreamy quality of the images. As they hadn't left a lot of breathing space, the crafting of these took quite a bit of time to get right. Personally, there is always a tension between a choice of filmmaking to my capacity, adding the captions and audio descriptions after, or making work which integrates accessibility in the actual construction of the work. Artists such as Jordan Lord do this extremely well. To make this film, I had to tailor a very flexible planning process, making quick, intuitive decisions and working in short bursts. And at this time, I think it would have been beyond my capacity to plan any more than I did. I think it's important to talk about the messy nature of accessibility and capacity as an artist, but also institutionally. Institutions tend to be a little nervous about making things accessible and often shy away due to fear of getting it wrong. As we know, accessibility, which is essentially care, is imperfect. It is a learning process, a discussion, essentially an active one. It is the consideration, thought, and willingness to learn which is important. RestFest is a great example of forethought to accessibility. The way you craft your program and your website is something we can all learn from. From making this film, I have learned that I need to start to think about accessibility in the very early planning stages, integrating space within the shaping of the film. Ultimately, I think this would be a more creatively interesting approach for me, and fundamentally, I hope, a more enriching experience for my audience. Practically, making the film felt like a Herculean adventure made through mountains of fatigue. Through its slow making, I feel like there is a physical imprint of my body left on the film. How the crafting of it had to meet my energy capacity, as well as the actual physical movements of rest, which I needed to do to make this film. Most of it made whilst lying down. Who knows? Maybe that imprint exists as a more distant layer, lying silently beside the narrative trajectory of my body within the film.
From my own experience creating art in a disabled body-mind, living on crib time, I know it certainly shapes the process and therefore the final work. How did living on crib time manifest in the film and in your creative process? And is there a significance in this, in the choice of title of the film?
The essay and the film are written in the present, but when in the present and chronically ill, time can expand swimmingly into the past via memory. Time can jump around rapidly, or the present and past can exist as one, fuzzy to delineate. This is especially true when significant periods of your past have been spent in fatigue, brain fog, or experiencing the same symptoms in the same place over long periods of time. There is something interesting which happens with time in a relapse, arriving back to the same conditions which you have experienced in the past. Your body's memory aware of all of the times which you have felt this way. Time stretches to exist in the past and the present at the same time. Like Ellen Samuels says, crib time is time travel. I use we year to collectively describe this experience of time. I propose using year as a verb. Collectively, we would be yearing. To year is to experience the long, inactive, crip, time or times which chronically ill and disabled people experience. It describes months turning into years, sick with a reduced capacity or mobility, further confused, or you could argue expanded, by brain fog, memory issues, and irregular sleep patterns. This is a kind of an exploded calendar expansion of the active experience of crip time. The definition of crip time which we often use is, rather than bend disabled bodies and minds to meet the clock, crip time bends the clock to meet disabled bodies and minds. Alison Kafer, 2013. Similar to crip time, which condenses and expands at the same time, to year or yearing can be used for the activity or non-activity of being ill over a long period of time or cycles of times. One not measured by the clock, but more by the feeling of experiencing the same illness or symptoms over time, the state of sickness. For example, a year can feel like an extremely long time to be sick, but it can also feel like it can pass by in the blink of an eye, especially when the years pile up and when time is spent doing much of the same thing, resting and sleeping, time spent in the fog of being sick. Years just disappear. Yearing also includes recurring periods of time spent in relapse. With reoccurrences and relapses, or simply many years piling up, several years then become the normal state. So one can also year over multiple years. This differentiates between an illness which has an end date, one which can be cured, and one which continues and repeats, penetrating and shaping your life as a chronically ill person. If to year and yearing is a verb, then we year encompasses us all of us with restricted capacity. The movement of time in the film, focusing on the present day, moving back and forth through memory, was one of the main reasons I thought that the essay could be adapted into a moving image work. And this explains why the title and the end of the film is so important to me. It is my experience, but I want to include us all.
Anything you wish someone had told you earlier in your career that you'd like to share with community members who may be in that stage currently?
The short answer is don't give up. My career has had large periods of inactivity when I was more concentrated on making music and I didn't feel like an artist. I only started making work again in 2018 because I was sick. I had been exhibiting since 1998, but by the time I started again, I had given up art for over a decade. In that break, although I was working in arts project management and doing a bit of curating, I was mostly making music, and I got heavily involved in the punk and DIY community. I felt more whole and held in that community than when I was making work as an artist. And a lot of this new era of my career is shaped by the ethics and politics I found in the DIY punk community, as well as the DIY mentality. Another big piece of advice is to find your people. I've been mostly housebound for the past 5 years, and my creative network is now mostly made of other chronically ill artists and writers, some of whom I met online. Our friendship is conducted through voice notes, the odd Zoom hang, and the occasional delicious IRL visit. I should imagine this way of connecting won't be new to those reading, but what I mean by find your people is find the people who continue to support you and who you can support in the same way, to keep each other ticking over. It is much less lonely when you realise that we are all struggling with the same things. We all feel guilty for not being able to make work when we are sick. But the more connections you can make with people who feel supportive, the more you realise that it's okay that the path is not straight, that it may break and veer off to unexpected places, but that eventually it comes back. It's just a different, slow, meandering path. I honestly never imagined that I would return to art, and although for a few different reasons I currently can't produce an enormous amount of work, it just won't quit me.
Do you have any plans to publish the original essay?
I'm currently seeking a publisher to publish the I Am Writing, I Am We essay, along with 5 others that I've written over the past 8 years about being chronically ill. Most are linked with an artwork or project. One essay has been performed. The one I mentioned earlier was commissioned about a film and then adapted into a script for a remix of the film. A couple have been included in artist books and zines, and 2 no one has seen. I am looking for interesting ways to present them, considering they have images or contextual projects which accompany them. And then, of course, there are the Den transcripts from my largest project yet, which was commissioned by the Wellcome Collection. If this sounds tasty, well, my inbox is open.
I'm very grateful that you've chosen to screen your film with RestFest. RestFest being a festival by and for the disabled community, and most viewers will also be disabled. Can you tell me more about the We Year program, and when creating it, did you have a disabled audience in mind?
I wanted to work with my immediate CRIP community who had shown great affinity to the subjects in the film. This film is made primarily for a disabled audience, so I wanted to generate events which would include the wider disabled community, to engage them on a deeper level with the themes in the film and to invite reflections from their own lives. I am so grateful that RestFest exists and that your online programming means that we are able to watch films from our beds. I am lucky that I was able to turn to some of the closest friends in my CRIP network to collaborate on the programme. As well as the RestFest 2-week online screening, there is a writing workshop with Shah Heather from the Remote Body called Permeable Body, Porous Time, on the boundaries of inside and outside and CRIP time, and a remote film club with a discussion and Q&A about the film. The programme is part of the second year of CRIP Resistance 2, Holding Space, Building Community, a series of online events organised by Resting Up Collective and Ort Gallery. I love working with Ort Gallery, who are based in Birmingham, UK, and who are, quote, community-led organisation who centre working class, disabled, queer and global majority artists and poets, creating spaces to slow down, unlearn and rebuild ways of working, grounded in care, access and collective well-being. Their way of working is grounded in their methodology of warmth, an approach which values accessibility, working to CRIP time and individual capacities, and which prioritises care and working towards equity in the arts. Personally, I had 2 objectives with this programme. As well as wanting to share this embodied experience of yearing indoors as subject matter, it was important for me to make visible the community support and resistance which bind the groups in this programme together. All of the organisations involved have no core funding, and most are either run by one or very few individuals. RestFest, the Remote Body, and Resting Up Collective are small grassroots organisations formed by CRIPs for CRIPs who cannot reach the galleries or cinemas. We often cannot physically network, but nonetheless we have created robust interpersonal connections to support each other, signing off our communications with CRIP love and CRIP solidarity. I wanted this programme to be a demonstration of how we make our own community and how to make visible the connections between these particular groups with these particular individuals. How this cross-knotted web of friends creatively prop each other up. How we are always there for each other, and how for the most part, no one really sees this work we do, often from our beds, often in a flare. As Shah says, in regards to CRIP storytelling, but which is pertinent here too, it writes us into the world when we have otherwise been excluded.
What's next on the docket?
I am always working on around 5 different projects at a time, and some languish for a long time depending on how I am. Currently, I am desperate to finish a wall piece which I started when I could stand up more easily, made with string of hearts plant stems and pressed bougainvillea bracts, called Our Fragile Future. And I've been working on a project about lava, waterfalls and crypt sex with the working title Holiday for the past few years. But without a producer and funds, it's taken a bit of a backseat. Really, I am in desperate need of an assistant. Excitingly, I am in the early stages of writing a book, writing being one of the more accessible things I can do. It is about ghosts, mediumship, gender, chronic illness, grief, and the body, and it might even be a little bit sexy.
About Sop. Sop, they, them, theirs, is a torn and crooked leaf, a root embedded in the dirt, a shoot reaching to the sky, an artist working in crypt time with words, sound, and moving image. They work primarily with nature, which they use as a portal to interrogate their own experience of existing in a chronically ill body and how other disabled and chronically ill bodies interact with and relate to nature and the natural world. Their work tends to center modes of sociality, beginning with personal narrative, then expanding through dialogue with their crypt community to include other bodies' concerns. They are currently working towards a book about grief, gender, chronic illness, and ghosts, and a moving image work about crypt sex and volcanoes. They have shown work at Wellcome Collective, British Museum, ICA, Cubit, Lux, and Whitechapel Gallery, and their work is included in publications, documents of contemporary art, walking, edited by Thomas Jeffries, Botanical Architecture, Plants, Buildings, and Us by Paul Dobrazik, and Bodies of Sound, edited by Irene Revel and Sarah Shin. They are anti-clock, pro-informal networks of care, anti-normality, standardization, and pro-interpersonal dedication. They live and work in Southeast London. You can find them at sop.rest and on Instagram at sop2_sop2_sop.